So the leader of ISIS, Al-Baghdadi, is dead. He blew himself up along with what we're told are 3 of his children and a spokesman. But before we all get into celebratory mode, we need to reckon with the fact that the U.S. was responsible for creating ISIS. We'll look into this foreign policy faux pas in this episode of Analysis Behind the News, where we provide the perspective that you can use to help save American liberty and independence. For the last couple of decades, the U.S. has spent trillions of dollars and thousands of American lives intervening in the Middle East. And for what? Many will tell you that it was for the oil, that we had an obligation to protect American interests in the region. And what American interest would that be? So that our gas prices wouldn't go through the roof? Yet our domestic policy was to ensure that areas of American soil that have energy reserves were locked up and not accessible to American industry. So we were forced to rely on imports from not so friendly countries. But it goes deeper than that. Many times, as we were aiding a group of rebels within a country to help topple that leadership, further down the road, we would end up fighting those that we helped train or arm. For instance, the New American wrote in an online article back in 2014 that ISIS boss al-Baghdadi was once a detainee at a U.S. prison camp in Iraq has been widely reported since at least the summer. Still, even on this, conflicting reports and comments from officials have muddied the waters. By June of 2014, multiple media outlets were reporting that al-Baghdadi had been detained in 2005 at Camp Bucca before being released in 2009. Some reports suggest he was a mere farmer swept up in the fog of war who became radicalized only after being rounded up and put in the prison with jihadists. Other sources, however, suggest Baghdadi, also known by another pseudonym, Abu Dua, was a radical jihadist involved in torture, kidnapping, and murder before being detained by U.S.-led coalition forces. Abu Dua was connected to the intimidation, torture, and murder of local civilians in Al-Qaim, states a 2005 Pentagon document cited in numerous media reports, with al-Baghdadi being identified as al-Qaeda's point man in the town of Al-Qaim. He would kidnap individuals or entire families, and accuse them, pronounce sentence, and then publicly execute them. Baghdadi was supposedly released from Camp Bucca in 2009. Of course, much of the establishment media reporting surrounding Camp Bucca as the birthplace of ISIS, whether deliberately or not, serves a number of purposes. For one, it distracts from the something far more explosive. At least a U.S. prison serving as an al-Qaeda school can be explained away as dumb policy. Far more revealing and important to the discussion, though, is the blatant role of Obama's supposed anti-ISIS coalition in creating, funding, arming, and training those same jihadist terrorists to overthrow the Syrian dictatorship of Bashar al-Assad. Vice President Joe Biden admitted as much during a recent speech at Harvard. Again, this is in 2014. So not only did we create the conditions for ISIS by our internal meddling, but we trained and armed ISIS soldiers and many others who would eventually go on to defect to ISIS and fight against American soldiers. But folks, the stupidity doesn't stop there. In August 2014, it was revealed that under the Obama administration, U.S. foreign policy aided ISIS in Syria while at the same time fighting them in Iraq. As the New American pointed out, many of the American-supplied weapons being used by ISIS were being employed to butcher Christians, Shias, and other Iraqis. As Alex Newman summed up in another online New American article, this time from 2012, as predicted by innumerable experts, imposing democracy in Muslim-majority countries has been a disaster for Christians. Asked for one example of U.S. foreign policy benefiting Christians, a senior official with the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom could not name a single one. Christianity has managed to survive in the Middle East for 2,000 years without government intervention. But if current trends continue, the religion of Christ could very well be eradicated in the region of its birth within the next few decades. And unfortunately, America will bear at least part of the responsibility. So, is this just Congress not knowing what they're doing? Perhaps the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing? After all, ISIS is hardly the only Islamic terrorist group to have benefited directly and indirectly from U.S. foreign policy. In fact, today it is common knowledge that the U.S. government armed, funded, trained, and radicalized Islamists in Afghanistan who eventually became the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Before that, the U.S. foreign policy establishment helped bring mass murderers such as Cuba's Castro and China's Mao to power. American taxpayers have been fleeced for billions of dollars handed to regimes that were known to support terrorism, and in some cases, even providing the aid directly to terrorists in violation of U.S. laws. As the New American wrote, undoubtedly there is much more unconstitutional mischief going on behind the scenes. So we have to ask, mischief or perhaps something even more deliberate? JBS CEO Art Thompson said in an interview with the New American that the rise of militant Islam is nothing more than a rise of socialism under a different title. History has shown us that socialism doesn't just happen. It's not a natural evolution for free people to willingly enslave themselves. There are planners that carry out an agenda to create the conditions that pressure the people to call for socialism, communism, or other government-sanctioned solutions that increase the control that government has over the people. Globalists have been creating the conditions for world government for more than a century. From meddling in the internal affairs of countries, to stripping the countries of their sovereignty through regional bureaucracy, to imposing democracy on other countries, each provides additional steps towards the time when countries will be merged together into one union or new world order under world government, at which point the American experiment in liberty would be dead. So, before we celebrate another high-level ISIS or Al-Qaeda leader's death, let's concentrate on fixing America's foreign policy and bringing it back within constitutional limitations, as well as heeding the advice of our founders who stated that America does not go out to seek monsters to destroy, and that peace, commerce, and honest friendship should be had with all nations, entangling alliances with none. Now, if you want to find out more about the folly of American foreign policy, check out Chapter 17 in this book, In the Shadows of the Deep State, by Arthur Thompson. And Chapter 17's title is U.S. Foreign Policy Strategy, How to Oppose Communism While Helping It. A link is provided in the description. And consider applying for membership in the John Birch Society as we work toward protecting American liberty and independence. And please, be sure to like and share this video, as well as subscribe. And until next time, we'll see you then.